The battlefield burned beneath twin suns, their light fractured by smoke and ash. The sky over Terra Nova was no longer blue. It was a bruised canvas of flame and grief. Shuttles screamed overhead, engines cutting through the haze like desperate cries. Amid the thunder of war, a single human woman moved with purpose. Her name was Alara Vance, a battlefield nurse of the Interplanetary Peace Corps, the kind who ran toward danger when others ran away. Her uniform was scorched, her hands trembling, but her heart refused to yield. Around her lay the broken, humans, Kharid soldiers, and other species too mangled to name. Alara knelt beside a wounded alien trooper, her voice steady though her lungs burned with smoke. "Stay with me," she whispered. "I'm not leaving you." Her words were simple, but they carried the rare calm of someone who still believed kindness could matter, even here. She tore open a med pouch, sealing a wound that oozed dark blue blood. The soldier stared at her in confusion. A human helping a Kharid? It was unthinkable, but Alara didn't see enemies. She saw pain. The war between the Terran Union and the Kharid Dominion had raged for years, two proud civilizations locked in endless retribution. Both sides had forgotten what they were fighting for. Yet Alara had joined the neutral corps, determined to heal whoever fell before her. "No life is worth less," she used to say when her superiors warned her not to cross lines. She didn't know that today. Those words would change her fate. Through the crackling air came the sound of engines. Not human. The ground trembled as a squad of Kharid soldiers descended through the smoke. Their armor gleamed black and gold, carved with symbols of conquest. At their center strode a towering figure, Prince Kael Dravarn, heir to the Dominion throne, known across the stars as the Crimson. Warlord, his name was whispered like a curse, ruthless, unbeaten, a commander who had crushed empires. When his gaze fell upon the human woman kneeling beside one of his wounded, his jaw tightened. In his world, mercy was weakness, and yet, there she was, her fragile frame bent over one of his men, hands working feverishly, eyes alight with quiet defiance. "Human," he said, his voice low and resonant. "You dare touch one of mine?" Alara didn't flinch. Her pulse pounded, but her voice came steady. "He's dying. You can kill me after I save him." The soldiers behind Kael shifted uneasily. No one spoke to him like that. But Kael raised a hand, commanding silence. He studied her for a long moment, something strange flickering in his crimson eyes. "Then save him," he said at last. "And if he dies, so do you." The threat hung heavy in the air, but Alara said nothing. She worked through the night, hands swift and sure. She used what little she had, salvaged serum, field stitches, whispered prayers. The hours bled together in silence, broken only by the rasp of breath and the hum of dying machines. When dawn broke, soft light cut through the haze. The soldier stirred, alive. Kael's shadow loomed over her. He said nothing at first, only looked down at the man breathing beneath her hands. Then slowly he sheathed his blade. "You saved him." Alara exhaled, weary but firm. "I told you I would." Kael's eyes narrowed. "You fear nothing, do you?" "I fear plenty," she replied softly, meeting his gaze. "I just don't let it decide who I am." For the first time in years, Kael Dravarn was silent, not out of pride, but out of something he couldn't yet name. When he finally turned to leave, the warlord's voice was quieter. "Strange creature," he murmured. "Your kind fights with compassion instead of claws." Alara didn't respond. She simply watched him go, heart pounding, not in fear but in wonder. That night, the fire across Terra Nova began to fade. The war still raged, but somewhere within its heart, a fragile seed of something new had been planted. Neither Kael nor Alara knew it yet, but a bond had formed, born not of conquest, but of courage. A story that would echo through stars. When Alara woke, the world had changed. Gone were the burned fields of Terra Nova. In their place stretched a vast expanse of metal and light, walls pulsing faintly, air humming with quiet power. Her head throbbed. The cot beneath her was too smooth, too cold. As she sat up, a metallic door slid open with a hiss, and there he stood. Prince Kael Dravarn. His crimson eyes gleamed beneath the dim light, his presence filling the room like gravity itself. Behind him, armored guards waited in silence. "You are aboard my flagship, the Sovereign Blade," he said, voice like thunder restrained. You were taken from the battlefield after the ceasefire collapsed. Alara blinked, steadying her breath. So I'm your prisoner? Kale's mouth curved faintly, not quite a smile. You are my guest. One who will use her talents to serve the Dominion. Alara frowned. By healing your soldiers? Yes. He stepped closer, the air between them taut. You saved one of mine when you had no reason to. I wish to see if your mercy is as endless as you claim. And if I refuse? She asked quietly. Kale's gaze flicked toward the guards, then back to her. Then I'll find another use for your courage. The words should have terrified her. Instead, she saw something beneath them. Weariness, perhaps even a trace of regret. For a prince bred for war, Kale spoke as though tired of his own voice. He turned sharply and motioned for her to follow. Alara did, her bare feet whispering across the polished floor. The corridors glowed faintly blue, filled with the rhythmic hum of engines. Outside a viewport, she glimpsed the vastness of space, nebulae swirling like painted storms, the wreckage of fleets drifting silently. Kale led her to a med bay unlike any she'd seen. Silver instruments, suspended healing pods, alien machinery pulsing with strange light. You will work here, he said. You will treat my wounded. Human or Kharid, it makes no difference. Alara met his gaze. You'd let me heal your enemies. Kyle's tone was flat, but his eyes betrayed curiosity. If they bleed, they are mine to mend or destroy. You seem to believe healing is strength. Prove it. And so she did. Days turned into weeks. Alara worked tirelessly, her calm voice a small mercy amid the cold precision of the Dominion warship. Soldiers, once suspicious, began to nod in quiet gratitude when she passed. Even the machine seemed to hum softer when she entered, but Kyle watched. Always. Sometimes from the doorway, sometimes from the shadows, silent and unreadable. She caught glimpses of him studying her, not with cruelty, but with a confusion he couldn't name. Once, after she saved a child from plasma burns, he spoke softly. Why do you care for my people? We are your enemies. Alara rinsed her hands, her voice low. Because pain doesn't wear flags. He stared at her for a long moment. Compassion is weakness where I come from. Then maybe weakness, she said, is what your world needs most. For a heartbeat, the air between them shifted. Kale's jaw tightened, his expression unreadable. Then unexpectedly he laughed, a short, low sound that startled even him. You are impossible, he said. And yet, he didn't finish the sentence. That night, Kale found himself standing before the observation window of his ship, watching the stars blur past. For years he had known victory, command, fear, but this strange ache in his chest was unfamiliar. The human woman was undoing him thread by thread without ever raising her voice. And far away in her quarters, Alara sat on her bunk staring at the same stars. She should have felt trapped. But instead she felt seen. The warlord who had once been her captor was beginning to reveal the man behind the armor. Neither trusted the feeling. Both feared it, but as the ship sailed through silent galaxies, something fragile began to bloom. Something neither empire had prepared for. The warlord and the nurse were no longer just enemies bound by circumstance. They had become mirrors, each reflecting the humanity the other had forgotten existed. The days aboard the Gao, sovereign blade stretched into quiet. Rhythm, one stitched together by the hum of engines, the scent of sterilized air, and the soft cadence of Alara's voice guiding the wounded back from the edge. Yet beneath that rhythm, something unspoken pulsed stronger with every passing day. It began with glances, brief, unguarded moments, when Prince Kyle Dravarn watched her from across the med bay. He told himself it was curiosity, nothing more. Humans were frail, unpredictable things, yet somehow this one moved through his warship as though she carried a light strong enough to bend the steel itself. One evening he found her working late again. The room was dim, shadows cast by the pale glow of medical scanners. A Kharid soldier lay sleeping under her care. Alara's fingers moved delicately, sealing a wound with focus so complete that she didn't hear Kale enter. You never rest, he said quietly. She looked up, startled but calm. Rest feels like a luxury in a place built for war. He stepped closer, his armor whispering against itself. You speak as though you understand it. Alara smiled faintly. I've seen enough of war to know it doesn't just destroy cities. It destroys the people fighting it. Sometimes even the victors, Kyle's jaw flexed. You think I am destroyed? I think, she said gently, you're tired of pretending you aren't. The words hit harder than any weapon. Kale turned away, fists tightening. He wanted to argue, to remind her who he was. The scion of the Dominion, heir to 1,000 conquered worlds. But the truth pressed against his ribs like an unhealed wound. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. My people only respect strength. My father taught me mercy is a poison. That hesitation costs lives. And do you believe that? She asked. He hesitated. I used to. There was silence then, deep and strange. The kind that feels like it might shatter something if broken too soon. Alara reached for a cup, poured a measure of clear liquid, and offered it to him. Water, she said with a small smile. A rare luxury in the middle of honesty. Kyle stared at her for a long moment before taking it. His gloved fingers brushed hers just for an instant, but the contact was electric, grounding him in a way no battlefield ever had. That night, Kale left the med bay with thoughts that refused to quiet. Her courage, her stubborn hope. It gnawed at the walls he'd built since childhood. He found himself standing before the ship's memorial chamber, where names of fallen warriors pulsed in endless light. He looked at them and, for the first time, wondered if all this glory was worth the weight it demanded. Alara, too, couldn't sleep. She sat on her bunk, replaying every word he'd spoken. There was a loneliness in him she recognized, the kind born not of cruelty but of endless duty. And against her will, she felt something stir. The next day, the alarms blared. The Sovereign Blade was under attack. Human interceptors had found them. Dozens of ships piercing through nebula clouds like silver knives. Shields at 30%, shouted a Kharid officer. Kale's voice cut through the chaos. Evasive pattern 7. Return fire! Alara ran toward the med bay as explosions rocked the ship. Injured soldiers flooded in, smoke and sparks trailing from their armor. Her hands worked instinctively, her heart pounding, but not from fear. Somewhere amid the chaos, she realized Kale hadn't left the bridge. When the final blast faded and the silence returned, the Sovereign Blade drifted battered but alive. Alara rushed to the command deck, just in time to see Kale helping a fallen crew member to their feet. He looked up at her, face streaked with soot, and for the first time she saw something unguarded in his expression. Your kind fights fiercely, he said, half smiling. I see now why your people endure. Alara stepped closer, her voice soft yet steady. And I see why yours follow you. Beneath all that armor, there's still a heart. Kale's breath caught. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The stars outside glowed brighter, scattered across the black like sparks of destiny. That night, neither the prince nor the nurse could sleep. For the first time, both feared the same thing, not the enemy, not the war, but the realization that the walls they'd built were already beginning to fall. The ship drifted in orbit above a shattered moon, its hull still scarred from battle. Silence filled the halls where alarms had once screamed. The wounded slept, the engines whispered. And somewhere deep within the Sovereign Blade, two souls wrestled with feelings neither could name. Alara stood by the observation deck, the stars washing her in silver light. She should have felt small against that endless expanse, but instead she felt strong, alive. Her reflection on the glass looked calmer now, her eyes deeper, her expression no longer that of a frightened nurse. The war had changed her, yes, but something else had too. Behind her, a quiet voice broke the stillness. You've been staring at those stars for hours, she turned. Prince Kale Dravarn leaned against the doorway, armor loosened, his usual authority replaced by something far gentler. They don't burn like ours, she said softly. Your stars seem colder. Kale stepped beside her, following her gaze. They are, he murmured. In my world, warmth is a danger. It softens men who must stay hard to survive. Then maybe your world has forgotten what survival truly means, Alara said. He studied her face, the conviction there. No fear, no pretense, just belief. The kind of belief he'd seen soldiers die for, and somehow it was more disarming than any weapon she could wield. Your words, he said, carry more force than you realize. She smiled faintly. I'm not trying to fight you. Then what are you trying to do? He asked, her gaze stayed on the stars. Remind you that you don't have to be the monster they made you. The silence that followed was fragile but not empty. Kale's armor caught the faint starlight as he turned toward her. You speak of things you cannot understand, human. The Dominion is built on conquest, My people, my father, would see compassion as betrayal. Then maybe you were born to betray the wrong kind of tradition, she replied quietly. Her words lingered in him long after she left the deck. For the first time, Kale began questioning not his enemies, but himself. The next day brought another test. A Dominion outpost had fallen silent on a border world. Kale's council demanded retaliation, a cleansing strike that would erase every trace of rebellion. But Alara, overhearing their discussion, stepped forward before she could stop herself. Wait, she said firmly. There could be survivors. Kale turned toward her, expression unreadable before his generals. This is not your place, healer. With respect, Your Highness, neither is blind vengeance. Her voice did not tremble. If there's a chance to save lives, any lives, you should take it. The chamber fell silent. One of the generals sneered. You let this human question your command? Kale's gaze cut to him, sharp as a blade. Enough. He looked back at Alara. For a long moment his face was unreadable. Then quietly he said, Prepare a medical team. You'll come with me. The council erupted, but Kale's tone left no room for argument. She will see the truth of our world, he said. When they arrived at the ruined outpost, smoke curled into the sky. Alara rushed into the rubble, searching for signs of life. Beneath twisted metal she found them. Kharid civilians, not soldiers. A mother shielding her child. A man pinned under debris. She shouted for help, and to her shock, Kale himself knelt beside her, lifting beams with his bare hands. Together they worked until every survivor was freed. The mother wept, clutching her child, whispering gratitude in her native tongue. Kale stood frozen, uncertain how to respond. Alara touched his arm gently. This, she whispered, is power too. Later, back aboard the Sovereign Blade, the crew looked at their prince differently. Word spread of how he had saved his own people, not through fire, but through mercy. Kale stood alone in the quiet of his quarters that night, her words echoing in his mind. Power isn't fear, he murmured. It's what you choose to protect. For the first time in his life, he felt something unfamiliar. Not weakness, not guilt, but peace. And as he closed his eyes, one face filled his thoughts, not of an enemy, but of a woman whose courage burned brighter than the stars outside his window. The weeks after the outpost rescue felt different. The ship no longer whispered only of war, it breathed. The crew who once feared their prince now walked with cautious respect, whispering tales of the human healer who had changed his judgment. And though no one dared speak it aloud, they knew something had shifted in Prince Kale Dravarn. He had begun to change. Every dawn, he stood at the observation deck where Alara often lingered, his eyes tracing the stars as if searching for something beyond conquest. He'd always thought victory was silence, the silence of an enemy crushed. But now that silence haunted him. The noise of Alara's laughter in the med bay. That was life. Alara, meanwhile, noticed it too. Kale's voice, once hard as iron, now carried a weight she understood, not command, but conscience. He visited her less like a ruler and more like a man uncertain how to begin a sentence. Sometimes they spoke about small things, the strange taste of Kharid fruit, the way Terran oceans glowed at night. Other times their silence said enough. One evening, Kale entered the med bay after hours. She was there alone, sitting on the edge of a cot, exhaustion softening her features. He watched for a moment before speaking. You've made my people see me differently, he said quietly. She looked up. I didn't make them do anything, Kyle. You did. He frowned slightly. No, you showed me there was another way. You remind me of what I might have been if I hadn't been born with a sword in my hand. Her voice lowered. And what do you want to be now? He stepped closer, stopping just before her. The air between them grew still. Free, he said simply. Free from the ghosts my father left me. Free from the idea that compassion makes me weak. Alara's heart trembled. For all his power, for all his command, it was this honesty that made him strongest. Then start there, she whispered. Change begins when someone dares to care. Before he could reply, alarms shattered the calm. The bridge called out, Incoming fleet, Terran vessels. They demand surrender or combat. Kale's expression hardened, the prince returning to his face. You'll stay here, he ordered. Kyle, he turned, voice heavy. If this is war again, I cannot protect you. But Alara stepped forward, eyes fierce. Then let me protect you in the only way I can. When Kale reached the bridge, Terran ships filled the view, weapons charged. His own generals clamored for battle. Yet Kale stood silent, Alara's words echoing in his mind. Change begins when someone dares to care. He activated the comms channel. This is Prince Kale Dravarn of the Kharid Dominion. I propose parley. The command deck went dead quiet. On the other end, a Terran voice, cold, suspicious, replied, Parley? From the Butcher of Varen? You expect us to believe your peace? Kale drew a breath. Not belief, proof. You have wounded aboard your lead ship. Allow my healer to treat them. The silence that followed stretched like a blade's edge. Then the Terran commander replied, Send her alone. Alara insisted on going. Kale's protest was quiet but desperate. They may not let you return. She smiled softly. Then it's your turn to believe in mercy. She went. Hours passed with no word. Kale paced the deck, fury and fear gnawing at him in equal measure. Every instinct screamed to launch the fleet, to bring her back by force, but the part of him she'd awakened whispered, Wait. When the comms finally crackled alive, Ilara's voice came through, calm but tired. It's done. The wounded are stable. And the Terran commander? Wants to talk. The bridge erupted in disbelief. Kale's grip on the console tightened. You did it, he whispered. That night, the two fleets floated side by side, guns silent for the first time in years. Kyle stood by the viewport, watching the human ships gleam silver against the void. Ilara stood beside him, her hand brushing his. Perhaps peace, she said softly, was never meant to be declared by generals, but by those willing to heal what others destroy. Kyle turned to her, his voice barely more than a breath. You risked your life for my dream. She met his gaze. No, Kale, I risked it for ours. Outside, two empires that had bled for centuries shared their first night without war. And for the first time, the galaxy itself seemed to exhale. Peace, fragile as glass, had begun to form between two worlds that had known only war. Yet even the gentlest dawn must fight to rise against the dark. On the Sovereign Blade, the corridors no longer echoed with orders and alarms. They hummed with cautious hope. Kharid and Terran medics worked side by side, exchanging tools and quiet smiles. The sight still felt impossible. But it was real. And at the heart of it all stood Prince Kale Dravarn and Alara Vance. He had begun sending emissaries to Terran command, pledging new accords. His people called him the Healer Prince now, a title that once would have shamed him. Now he wore it with quiet pride. But every victory came with resistance. The Dominion Council, old and unbending, watched with cold disapproval. One evening, Kale stood before the council, their faces flickering on the hollow display. We can rebuild what war has taken, he said firmly. Trade, science, peace, it is possible. An elder's voice cut through the silence. You sound like that human woman you keep aboard your ship. Kyle didn't deny it. Perhaps she sees what we've forgotten. She has weakened you, another snarled. You speak of peace while our enemies breathe. Your father would have cast her into the void. Kale's jaw clenched. Then my father was wrong. The connection severed with a harsh click. Kale stood still for a long moment, anger trembling beneath his calm. He'd faced countless battles, but none as bitter as this one, the war for his own soul. When he finally returned to the med bay, Alara was there, tending to a Kharid child whose eyes gleamed with trust. She looked up as he entered. You're late, she said gently. He managed a small smile. Council business. They think I've lost my mind. Or maybe, she said, you've found your heart. Kale's laugh was low, genuine, but beneath it lingered something heavier. They want to remove me from command. They say my compassion is betrayal. Ilara's gaze softened. You knew this would come. Yes, he admitted. But I didn't expect it to hurt this much. She stepped closer, resting her hand on his arm. That pain means you're changing something real. Change never happens without it. For a long moment, their eyes locked. No words, no titles, just two beings bound by something larger than war. Then Kale reached into his armor and pulled out a small dark crystal, faintly glowing. This, he said, is the Oath Stone. My people use it to bind their word. When a Kharid prince swears upon it, it becomes law. Ilara tilted her head. What are you doing, Kale? He placed the stone between them. I swear before the stars and my ancestors that I will end this war, and that no human, no Kharid, will ever bleed for my crown again. The stone glowed brighter, its light pulsing with his heartbeat. Alara's breath caught. Kyle, if you do this, it will cost me the throne, he finished for her. I know. Then why? He looked at her, eyes fierce but tender. Because for the first time I've met something stronger than power. She swallowed hard. What's that? Hope, he said simply. You gave it to me. Before she could respond, the ship trembled. The alarm blared, an incoming fleet. The Dominion Council had made their decision. They had come to reclaim their lost prince. Cale straightened, every trace of doubt vanishing. Get to the command deck, he ordered, but Alara shook her head. Not without you. Their eyes met. Two souls forged in fire and mercy, standing against the storm. When the enemy ships filled the viewport, Cale stood before his crew, voice clear and steady. We do not fire, he said. Not unless fired upon. Today we defend peace. The crew hesitated only a heartbeat before answering as one. For peace. Ilara's hand brushed his as the stars lit up with the glow of approaching battle. And in that moment, even before the first shot was fired, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. For what would follow would not be the fall of a prince, but the rise of something far greater. The sky burned. Streaks of light slashed through the black, where Dominion warships descended like thunder-made flesh. The sovereign blade trembled beneath the weight of their arrival, massive, merciless, and countless. Prince Cale Dravarn stood at the viewport, his silhouette cut against the storm. His crew waited for the order to fire, yet he didn't speak. His eyes were calm, even as destruction closed in. Beside him, Ilara Vance stood silent, hands trembling slightly around the console edge. She had seen battlefields before. She had tended to dying soldiers, heard their last breaths whisper across her palms. But this was different. This was not just war. This was destiny. The Dominion fleet's voice echoed through the ship. Cale Dravarn, you have betrayed the blood oath. Surrender or be erased from the stars. Cale's lips curved in a faint, defiant smile. Tell them, he said softly, that the blood they speak of belongs to all who've died for their pride. And I will spill no more. Ilara stepped closer, her voice low but steady. They won't understand words, Cale. I know, he said, turning to her. But they'll understand courage. The battle began. Bolts of plasma screamed through the void, lighting up the darkness. Shields flared, alarms wailed, metal groaned like a wounded beast. Cale's orders cut through the chaos, sharp, unyielding. Hold formation. Divert power to the forward shields. Protect the civilians. Through it all, Ilara moved like water, steady, flowing, fearless. She guided medics, patched wounded soldiers, soothed terrified refugees. And when she looked up between explosions, she always found Cale's eyes searching for hers. That brief glance, enough to remind them why they fought. But the Dominion flagship loomed closer, its weapons locking on. A single strike would end it all, Cale. A voice cried over comms. They're charging their main cannon. Cale clenched his jaw. Evacuate decks 7 through 9. All power to defense grid. It won't hold. Someone shouted. Cale looked at Ilara. Maybe not. But they need to see who we are. Before she could answer, the ship shuddered violently. Hit. Hard. Sparks rained down like golden dust. Cale stumbled, blood trailing from his temple. Ilara caught him before he fell, her hands shaking. Stay with me, she whispered fiercely. Don't you dare leave now. He managed a faint smile, even through pain. You sound like my war instructors. I'm worse, she said, tears glinting. Because I care. That small truth spoken in the chaos of war cut deeper than any wound. Cale turned toward the comm station. His fingers hovered over the control. One final broadcast, open frequency. To every Dominion ship, he said, voice raw but unbreakable. This is Prince Cale Dravarn. I will not fight you. I will not kill for a throne built on ashes. If you must destroy me, do it knowing I die for peace. His voice echoed across the fleet, transmitted through every channel. For a heartbeat, even the stars seemed silent. And then, miracle. One by one, Dominion ships began to power down their weapons. Pilots hesitated. Generals paused. In the vast silence, the impossible happened. An empire stopped to listen. Ilara pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. Cale, you did it. He looked at her, exhausted but radiant. No, we did. Hours later, the battlefield was still. The enemy retreated, not defeated but changed. Coyle's words spread faster than light, whispered through systems carried by hope. The war was over. Weeks passed. The Sovereign Blade became a sanctuary, a place where Terrans and Kharid rebuilt side by side. And in the great hall beneath banners of two worlds intertwined, Kale stood waiting in ceremonial armor of silver and blue. Alara entered in a gown of white and starlight, simple, radiant, alive. Every step she took echoed with the memory of blood, mercy, and love stronger than war. When she reached him, Kale took her hand. "The stars once told me that humans were fragile," he said softly. "They were wrong. You are the strongest thing I've ever known." Alara smiled through tears. "You're still a terrible liar." Laughter rippled through the hall, and then silence as Kale lifted the same crystal oathstone between them. He whispered, "I swear by the stars that bind our worlds, where you go I will follow. Where you heal I will protect." Alara touched the glowing stone, her voice trembling. "And I swear that no distance, no galaxy will ever make me forget what we fought for." The crystal flared with pure light, filling the hall. In that glow, humanity and Kharid stood as one, no longer enemies, but a promise. And when they kissed, it wasn't just the union of a nurse and a prince.